Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. And this episode today, well, the topic is going to be the price for success, and I will talk about that a little bit towards the end. I'm going to tell you what I've been up to this week. We've had mixed weather and we've also had setback in air quotes. But what I want to do first is I float an idea with you guys. Just spoke to Reese, and he's the resident Victor Meldrew and I'm the resident wannabe Victor Meldrew. And what we're going to do is we're going to probably get together, hopefully, and do an episode from time to time dedicated to basically the moans of the gardening industry. Now, don't get me wrong, we might touch upon some of the big ones like dog mess and, tight customers and all that jazz. But this is the trivial things. This is the things that, it's like washing lines. I personally hate washing lines in a garden. I always snarl myself up on them. You find yourself walking along with your mower and your music on, and then suddenly your headphones get ripped off because you've gone under the line and thought you'd ducked enough and you haven't. So like I said, it's going to be a very light-hearted, sort of moan about this industry, but with a constructive element. So again, if you've got any moans, anything along them lines, get them in. We're going to try, and I'm going to talk about some of my issues, and Reese is going to talk about some of his issues, and we'll try and get to the bottom of them between the two of us. So, it's been a mixed week this week. We've had good weather and we've also had bad weather. Today was a wet weather day, and when it's like this, when you check the forecast and you can see that it's supposed to be raining all day and then it's on and off, at parts of it. Well, there's two things that force this decision. One of them I'll get onto a little bit later, but I'm supposed to have been power washing today and tomorrow, and I've decided to move that into the next couple of weeks. But, the weather, it's, I always say I'm not a martyr to this industry. I will work when I need to, when it's wet. But if I don't need to, then I won't work. If it's pouring down with rain and it's just horrendous, you're not going to catch me out in it, basically. One of the things that I do try and do is I try and sort of do things to, either help the business or generate a little bit of money for the business. So even if it is a really wet weather day, I will go out and at least try and do a couple of jobs or a job, because, like I said, it's very rare that it rains all day, but you might find that it's got a wash out in the morning, but then actually it might pick up in the afternoon. Today we had a wash out in the morning, couple of hours of on and off, and then it just went back to pouring down. But to be fair, I used that time. Well, today I've spent most of the day just catching up with these little nitty-gritty sort of jobs. So I had to drop some stuff off to a customer today. I had to go up to the scrap yard to drop some scrap metal off to them. I had to go and get some wood cut for my camper van. I'm putting the oven in hopefully this weekend. So, you know what I mean? Nice little chilled out day. I managed to go get a coffee and went and done a little bit of shopping. So it's not been a total waste. For me, I find that I need to have some sense of feeling productive. Don't get me wrong, it's tempting as always to just think, sod it, I'll just go and, slob out. But I think gone are them days for me. I'm very much wired up with, don't get me wrong, I'll rest when I need to rest and rest when I need to rest, and I can rest, but sometimes, especially in a week, you feel like, you've got to sort of work, basically. So I'm also planning a trip, so I'm hopefully going to go out in a camper van next couple of weeks. Before the kids' holidays, I want to tick off a couple of the local tourist sites near to me. So there's Matlock Baths. I've never been. I would like to go, so I want to tick that off. And then I think I'm going to try and plan another little trip before, because it just gets stupid. all the little tourist spots that aren't normally bothered throughout the year, when it's a nice day and the kids are off, they just get heaving. So I'm going to just nip up midweek, I think, Thursday, Friday, and just have a little explore Rooney, try and have a little bit of a fun time, basically, before the mad hordes descend. So I'm just sort of planning that out and just looking at days. For me, the business comes first, especially at this time of the year. But if I can blag a day off in a week or a couple of days off, then I will. I find as well there is work starting to come in from other areas. Customers are starting ringing up now and saying about shrubs and hedges need knocking back. I don't mind tackling shrubs and hedges at this time of the year. I know it's a bit of a hot topic, but if it's a standing shrub or a thin hedge, you can see all the way through, and you can see no signs of anything nesting or attempting to nest. Quite often, the majority of properties I look after, I always keep my eye, and yourself if you're going to disturb anything. So I just find it's time to just get cracking on. As ever, if it is that, and I've had to refuse a couple of jobs this year, it always amazes me. I've had to refuse a couple of jobs because I've found nests, and it's like, well, can't you cut around them? Are you there now? I'm like, well, there's eggs in the nest. Well, can't you just do it whilst you're on tea? I'm like, so like I said, I always try and look after, nature, and I don't begrudge any sort of nature, to be fair. I try and look after it as best as I can, but ultimately, you've got to do your job. You've got to sort of be attentive to these little things. So like I said, we're sort of cracking on with that. The new mower has been working out really good. I did there's a lawn that I do once every 4 weeks, and I've actually spoke to the person. I've managed to get it on a fortnightly cut. So this property is going to auction. So I've said about swapping to a fortnightly cut. So it looks pretty for me. It looks nice. I think there's back-to-back viewings for the next 4 weeks. So she's fine with that. But the new mower is absolutely blasting through the grass. It's due to the setup of it and the big open chute at the back. It hasn't got side discharge. But it's got a big open back, a big open sort of slot at the back, like the much bigger opening I've ever seen. And as such, it did not get blocked once. It didn't stall once. It just flew through the grass. Yes, it was a rear drop cut, so it wasn't the best looking. But I'm hoping the next cut that I do and the following cut, it should get better and better, because we aren't topping it. We aren't taking massive amounts of grass off. And I even did one of my customers' lawns this. He's a fussy bugger, this bloke is, and he always likes his grass cut as short as possible. But his front lawn won't allow it because it's very mossy. But I blasted over it with that, and he was pleasantly surprised, actually. I think we've been able to adjust the wheels front a little bit higher than the back. It's still allowed for that airflow. But it was fine, actually, so he was very happy and I was very happy. I'm being a little bit cryptic because I can't remember on the last podcast if I told you what mower I've got. But I know coming up in the future I've got a YouTube video talking about what mower I'm going to choose. And I've talked about, in another YouTube video, I've actually talked about the mower that I've bought and shown you. So again, I don't want to go into it too much. But yeah, like I said, it's working out really, really well. Unfortunately, we've had a little bit of a setback this week in terms of my sciatica has flared up, and I can't begin to tell you how painful it is. This happens. It was weird. I was only talking to somebody about this last week, and I was saying to him, like, oh yeah, I suffer from it, because he suffers from it. I said, I'm lucky that it only comes on once every 3 or 4, well, I'm saying once every few years, let's just say. And I said to him, when it comes on, it's really bad, and it literally come on. I can tell when it's coming on because as you sort of bend, you can feel it twinging and pulling. And I was like, oh, great. And sometimes I've done that, and I've made sure I've been really, really careful the following day, or the following week or something, and it's not bit. But I don't know, it must just be the time for it, or I've done something too wrong, or just twisted it wrong, or I don't know. But oh my God, it is absolutely vicious. I'm walking funny, bending down, and I'll be honest with you, it takes a hit on my mental health, in terms of it makes me grouchy. Anybody that suffers from any form of pain when they're carrying it every single day, you can't help but you get snappy almost, and I've found, unfortunately, the van doors have been slammed a few times, and equipment's been not thrown in the van, but it's had a talking to, let's just say. And I find sometimes you normally you can put up with a lot of things before you get that red mist, but I think this time round, with this constant back pain, it's affecting how I'm walking. I'm all right to work at it, and people have said to me, "Why don't you have it off? Why don't you go home and rest?" But you can't. You can't rest sciatica. You've got to keep moving. I found that if you rest it and have a time off and sit down and lie down, it makes it worse and worse and worse, and it gets where it starts making you feel sick. I'm all right if I lie down, but then once I lie down and once I get back up, I have to then get myself moving again, and it makes it even worse. Mornings are interesting, put it that way. I won't go into details. But like I said, you find yourself, so unfortunately, you sort of, I've been stuck with this now for a week, and it's just awful. But we're getting on with it. As sad as it sounds, I actually find working helps, because physically it keeps me moving, but mentally it's keeping my mind off it. It's keeping me thinking about work, getting through the job, get this job done, get the day done, move on, and that's really been helping me. And that's what I've been seeing. I look at my jobs list in a day, and I think, right, once I've done this, I can have a rest, I can lie down, the day's done then, I can just start it again. I'm hoping it goes off at some point, but I was talking to my friend today. He said, "How long does it last?" And I says, "Luke, sometimes it can last 2 weeks, and I've even had it where it's lasted months before. So we've just got to see. Painkillers don't touch it. Creams, soaking it in the bath, nothing touches it, unfortunately. It's not actually my back that's sore. I can still lift and pull and push. It's just movements that cause this pain. But I think that's enough moaning about my ailments. So next week, so hopefully by the time that this podcast comes out on a Monday, this is the Monday where I go back to that customer and see what it is that, first I will see if I am going back to that customer. Like I said in the previous video, I have got a strong sort of suspicion that she will cancel the services. I've got a strong feeling that she said, I've got a feeling that she's going to cancel the services. So you'll probably find out a week from then. So I'll let you know. So it will be pretty much 2 podcasts. Where I did have a comment, and somebody said on the video saying, "Great podcast as normal." This is from Darren Day. Big shout out. Thank you for that, matey. Said, "Sam, you should say to the lady, £60 a visit. You do the lawns and the shrubs monthly. That way she's still spending roughly the same amount of money." And he did go on and say, "I feel you pay me. I've got 1 or 2 the same. I put money up to do the extra." I will see what she says. If it is, for me, a monthly cut, I could do it, and I could do it at that price. It's one of them, really. I don't mind doing it at the price. So I quote her £30 every 2 weeks. So it's either neither or there sort of thing. And I think she's honestly expecting me to do it for do it. She'd want a monthly cut for the same price. And it always baffles me. Another customer asked me the other day, and to be fair, she's all right. She's a late payer, but she's all right. The work's all right. But she said to me the other day, she says, "Could you do it as do it every 3 weeks instead?" And the only reason I'm doing it on a 3 week is because it's around the corner from my house. If it was somewhere else, I wouldn't. And also with having a new mower, I know whatever growth there is, this thing will just thrash it down. Keep banging on about that thing, don't I? But I think sometimes you've got to do it. I'm not worrying, but it's like this year, I've got quite a few customers where I'll be losing them. So I talked about this in one of my videos. We've got properties that the people have, I think there's 2 properties I'm looking after where they've died. So the house has been basically cleared, and then, well, basically the house is on the market. Another one of my customers, he's been taken onto end of life care, so his house is going to be sold at some point and cleared. And I think there's you know, when you look at your customer base, you know, it sounds horrible, but I look at some of them, you know, there's a couple, you know, it's their 90th birthday. I think, you know, we're going to be here next year. So it sounds horrible, but you've got to sort of think about that. So you do, especially the easy low-hanging fruit, like this customer I just said, I don't mind entertaining it. I don't mind keeping it on. This lady that I did mention, if it is, I've got a feeling she is going to cancel. I think she's had a couple of weeks to notice, to look for somebody. I drove past her house the other day, actually, and I've noticed the front lawn is still very, very short. So it's either she's mowing it, because there's no growth of weeds at all. So either she's mowing it, or she's, you know, somebody else has done it, and then they're the new gardener, and she'll just do the classic cancel on the day sort of thing. But I'll let you know. As I said, I'm hoping having a conversation with her and basically stating the facts and saying about, you know, how it is, you know, that I've tried, done all these extras for her, you know, basically at least that you can expect is what you asked for, which is the fortnightly visits. So we'll see, really. You just don't know, unfortunately. I was saying this in another video. There's people out there that are fiercely loyal. There's people out there that don't care. They just need somebody, and it's not that they're too lazy, but that could be a factor, or they're happy, whatever, or it's more of a trouble to look for somebody, or whatever. You know, the vast majority of people just put up with it. You know, they might not like the price, but they just want the guard. They haven't got any interest in it, basically. So they're happy for somebody else to do it. But then I do think there's people out there that they just expect people like us to work for nothing, either on a slave rate, or, you know, preferably. I've worked for people in the past where I think if I went and said, you know what, I'm going to do your gardening for free all year, they'll be over the moon. They won't even question it. They won't think, well, don't you need to make money, you know? And this is the thing, I do it, and I don't do a lot of freebies, but, you know, I have it where they'll say to me, oh, could you just do this? It's like one of my customers. She would never dream of asking me to do so. I pick a bag of compost up and, you know, do like little bits of extras. And she always even if it's a few quid, you know, I say to her, look, it doesn't matter. She says, no. She says, you've done something for me. You're running a business at the end of the day. I picked a bag. She gave me £3. And I don't mind, you know, but some people wouldn't dream of putting on people. You know, some people are very humble. One of the things I used to do, I have got a lot stricter, but I had it with a few people where I'd do these extras, or, you know, not charge them for little bits. And I'd do it for the people who I thought I could trust. And I'd say to them, look, just give me winter work. You know, let me cut that shrub at winter. Let me do that job at winter. And they'd be like, yeah. And, you know, to be fair, most of them did say to me, oh, this needs doing that. And remember you said you're going to do that. But then I've had it where people haven't, you know, and unfortunately, you don't dwell on these people, but you know, you can't help but hark back to them and think, you know what, I have been a bit too lenient with some of them. So I'll let you know, guys. I'll let you know what's said. As I said, I have got a feeling, you know, that figured I've maybe, if she cancels, I'm going to send her a text message back, basically not being shitty, but I'll get my point across that, you know, in this industry and how I run my business, I try and help people. I try and, you know, look after people. And in this instance, I've looked after you. I've looked after your garden. There's been many instances of free work that's been instilled. And basically, maybe it's too petty, and it's very rare. I think this will be actually the first time I've ever done it, but I'll send her something like that and see what she says. But I might do it. I don't know. I am pretty convinced I am going to do it, but I think we all do this, where we think, right, I've got this argument lined up, I've got this, this comeback lined up, and luckily it never happens and you never use it, or if you do use it, you botch it, or you don't end up saying it. So, we'll have to see. The thing is, I do wear my heart on my sleeve when it comes to this. I try my best for people, but unfortunately there's people out there that just take advantage, or, take the mick, basically. But it is what it is. So, this is the main topic of the video, where it's the price of your success. And basically, so quick disclaimer, I'm going to talk about tax. I'm going to talk about my appointment with my accountant today. Now, I'm not a tax expert. I do try my best to listen and absorb as much information from my accountant. I do try and keep abreast of current, accounting, information out there. There's a few people I listen to, podcast wise, about, about tax and business and stuff like that. But again, unfortunately, I'd say as much as I listen, probably less than 50% actually goes in. My brain isn't geared up for it. My accountant is a very good accountant, I believe. I believe he's passionate, and I believe he does the best he can for me. So I'm not debating what he's done here. So basically, what's ended up happening is I've had a much bigger tax bill than I thought I was going to get. So this is, I'm only telling you this as basically words of warning. Get into the habit of putting over, as best as you can, what you think tax is per. So I always tried to put roughly 20% of my earnings into a separate account. And then my theory is if it is that it's more than that, well, I've broke the back of it and I can just put a little bit extra. Best case, though, I always think, well, it might be less than that. Now, last year I invested very, very little back into the business. So last year I think I said this on the YouTube channel, but last year I invested as much back into myself in the camper van as possible. So I invested very little into the business, but what money I did have, I put back into the camper van to get it all converted and all done, stuff like that. But I was still working like crazy, and it was still a good year. Now, this year, so when it comes down to a tax submission, then I have had to pay a lot of tax, but I've not been able to offset a lot. So, hence the bigger tax bill. But also, from what I can gather, from what the accountant said, the government basically take a stab at estimating what tax you'll pay next year, and they expect a amount of that. He did tell me what it was, but I know what I need to pay, but they expect a amount of that to be paid for next year. So I've got an amount in July to pay, and I've got a big amount to pay in January. Now, I was talking to the accountant about this, and I told him why it was, the earnings was high this year and why the expenses was lower than the previous years. And I says to him that the plan for this year is to invest as much back into the business. And I was looking at getting a new van, but I don't think I'll be able to do that because I've got to save for this tax bill. So I'll have to see on that, but I'm still on the track for investing as much back into the business. And he says, after that it should settle down a bit next year. And then also, hopefully by next year, because tax will be paid off by then, I should be in a position where I can look for another van. So I've also had a word with my van and told it to behave itself. But anyway, so like I said, we're in a position where we've got that to sort of, so it should calm itself down, especially for the next few years. With what I've spent this year, and then hopefully next year what I'll be spending on the van, it should bring it down quite a bit. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not adverse to paying tax. Me personally, I think, and this is what he said to me actually, and it's a price for success. So as my business is doing well, I'm obviously paying more tax on it. So it shows. So like I said, I'm not adverse to it. I'm not angry. I'm not going to debate, whether I think what I spend, what my tax gets spent on, whether it's good or bad. How I see it is what it is situation. It's like trying to tell water not to be wet. There's nothing I can do about it. I just have to pay it. He did say to me that maybe going down a limited route might be a bit better tax-wise. But then he says there's a little bit more complexity. But then he said, by the sounds of it, with your investing, it should calm itself down, as in, it shouldn't. What you'd save by doing that, you won't need it if you're going to do that anyway. So again, I'm only going off his advice here and my judgment. So don't worry, there is still enough food in the cupboard, so to speak, that if I had to pay this tax bill now, the big one, I could. I'm all right. It just means that we're just going to have to sort of not creep and go, but, be a little bit more careful with what we do spend. It's like I said, there is money in the pot, so to speak, for it. But I was envisaging sort of the tax what I was paying this time last year, which was, nowhere near. So, like I said, you've got to remember as well, the tax I was paying last year, that previous year, I'd invested a lot back into the business anyway. So I was paying less tax for that. And then this year, we've invested in nothing in the business. It's paying it forward where I've got to sort of, So, and as well, my earnings, it says only year 5. So year 3, I think, or year 2 and 3, that was when I was coming off the back of my operation where I had a lot of time off. And then the other year, I'd had another operation. So again, I'd had time off. So, now I'm into the sort of a big boy tax. Like I said, it is what it is. And as sad as it sounds, I like a challenge. I like a goal. I like a deadline. I like pressure as long as I can manage it. So I like the fact that I've got to hustle like crazy now to get this bill sorted. And I've got to hustle like crazy, potentially, because now I know the extreme end. So even though my next year my tax bill should theoretically be lower, and the following year, well, it's telling me now that I need to make sure that I'm doing my best to keep, I'll be saving for the higher one, put it that way. So it is what it is, guys. It's just one of them. But the only reason I've mentioned it is, so I always do my tax submission so whenever that letter comes through and they ask for that year's tax to be submitted, that's as soon as I do it. Now, admittedly, I am late. Whenever that letter comes through in April, normally I get it booked in straight away. I've not been lazy, but I should have done it earlier, but I ended up doing it now, so in June. But that's fine. We've got the funds ready for July's, as I said, we've already saved up. But the point I'm making is don't leave it till the last minute to then submit, and then don't leave it till the last minute, because you've then got to, if you have a big bill, well, you haven't got as much time. I've got 6 months potentially. I've got from now to whatever in January. I think it's 31st of January or something. So I've got 6-7 months really. So I've got more than enough time to pay for it. But you've got to remember that December and January are poor months for me, and that's when I'm going to be in hospital. So realistically, I've got I've got June, July, August, September, October, and November. So I've still got 6 good months to get it paid for. So it is what it is. Don't worry, there still will be. I am hoping to get at least one more juicy piece of equipment. And then that way, that should hopefully, again, that little bit lower tax bill next year. Like I said, it's for me, you can't avoid it. And I would never advocate it. I'd never say don't. You've got to pay your dues. You've got to pay into society, whatever. And I know that's a hot topic of conversation right now. So, like I said, we're going to keep putting away for that. I just wanted to mention it, really. And another thing as well is I pay the tax bill a week before it's due. As in, I could pay the first one now, but my accountant said to me, he says, Luke, don't pay it until it needs paying, because you could need that money. You know, you could need that, and if you haven't got it, you haven't got it. You know, if you spend it and you needed it, you're hooped. So spend it, pay it when it needs to be paid. I always shoot for a week before, because in my mind, paranoia, I think, well, what happens if my bank goes down? What happens if something happens? I don't want to do it the night before. So, like I said, we'll see what that customer says. We'll get this big tax bill smashed off. It's all we can do at the end of the day. I think working in this industry is hard. It really, really is hard. It's stressful at times, but I think ultimately you've got to do what you think's the best in this instance to look after yourself. My advice to you is, whatever you earn, if you earn 50 quid for a lawn, put £10 in a pot. If you take £200 a day, put 40 quid in a pot. And that's depressing. When you start thinking about that, you're thinking, 300 quid a day or 200 quid a day, nice little juicy £1,000 a month, £1,000 a week, whatever. Well, 20% of that, 200 quid, it's a decent chunk, that is. You've got to put that away. You've not got to touch it, because when they want it, they want it. So like I said, it's just one of them, guys. It is what it is. Nice little bit of tax chat. So I hope the rest of your submissions have been good to you. And yeah, as I said, guys, have a good day. As usual, keep on gardening.